Kubor nakaslem jong unongsan Hima.
Menteri Rangba Barim ke Jela Dr. Mukul Sangma, ula Pynrem jor Halor ke Ïada ke Sorkar Jela, ha kabede ba ke Jingsiew ram bat nang kieu karam, bat ke Jingbom biang ha ke rukom penyat ya ke pisah tingkah. Habakren syakilat pathai kubor Dr. Mukul ula ong, ba ke Sorkar ke Ïada jubor, wat hadian balak dau lingba ke Kaiphod Comptroller Auditor General ke India, bagi don shibun ke Jingbakla ha ke rukom penyat ya ke pisah, ha ke ba ke Sorkar Jela ke beteng ban len bat kentat, wat habala nang kieu karam ke ba ke Jela ke Shim. Ulaong baka Sorkar ke beteng ban Shim ram ban sieu ya karam ke baladan lupa ke balong ke Jingma hakisngi bat kipor ban sawan bat kani kalong ke Jingbu jing ya ke pateng. Ulaong bah ke por jong ke Sorkar ke bamau ulayalam ke Menteri Rangba ke fiscal deficit lani ke Jingduna ha ke mang tingka kam jupalat ya ke lai persen Henry ha kani ke Sorkar ke fiscal deficit kala palat ru ya ke 100% ha ke baki ai dau ru baka Sorkar pedeng ke syak ban Shim ram kat kum ki kendan. Ulaong baka Sorkar ke Ïada da ka baong dei ban khuslai ke Jingsiew ram Henry ka don ke jing khuslai ya ki por ban sawan. Dr. Mukul ulaong ru bahaba ka ajing ken baka jingyo pisa kan kham kieu ke Jingsiew ram ru ka dei ban kham hiar Henry ka ne kamlong kumta ha ka Sorkar namar ka nang kenton ya ka ram na uwe usnam sha uwe pat usnam. Halor ke jingkam ke Sorkar baka la yo pisa shu ne banas namar ba biang ka rukam penankam ya ka pisa kum gajal jivan mission na ka Sorkar pedeng Dr. Mukul ulaong baka JJM kadai ke basyubyang tang hakikat kisla Henry Hamadan kambyang satya bat mau un salet hi dalade ban pet Hamadan hatu phinlet kat kum kikot kisla ke bala pen bakalong ke babyang ne phinlet daga jingshisha ban shakri ya ki pat ba ulakali.
You go again to the fiscal deficit. Who says that you cannot borrow? We say that yes, you can borrow. That is precisely what has been one of the way of as usual, the used instrument for funding government interventions in respect of development. But what is the purpose of borrowing? And where are you borrowing from? You may borrow from the government of India, which is considered as a soft loan. Okay. Where government of India give you lots of space to, maneuver, keeping in mind the constraints of the states. This is a collective responsibility that both union government and state government assume upon itself in really utilizing the resources within the command of both government of India and the state governments. After all, it's like an arrangement between the parents and the children, something like that, So now here, you do not have only the parents who are lending you. You also have others who are lending you. Now tell me one thing. If you are borrowing, you have an EMI, you have to repay both the principal and the interest. So you will see in every budget, if you are looking at the budgetary projection and the actual expenditure in respect of 22-23, you see it. It's all in the table, the budgeted projection and the actuals. So you see there the repayment of principals and interests. Now, if you have borrowed from the bank, you have an EMI. Now you cannot pay this EMI because your earning is not enough. Now suppose you have to pay 75,000 and you are earning only 50,000. How will you pay that 75,000 EMI? So you again borrow. And you borrow to fund the borrowing and the repayment of principal and interest. This is what is happening here. You understand? This is exactly what is happening here. So borrowing and then borrowing to really repay the both principal and interest by increasing the space of borrowing. That is why the CAG has, in a nutshell, in a more simpler and respectful term, indicated its concern. And the government of the day has the audacity to hide from the truth and be on denial mode. This is condemnable. This is condemnable because we are all concerned about the future of the state. And obviously, when you talk about the future of the state, then you talk about the fiscal health. You don't expect your parents to lend, borrow and borrow and borrow and leave behind the burden of debt upon you as children. That is not what the sensible parents do. So running the government is sane. Now, you look at out of the total borrowing. When you are borrowing, that means why we call it fiscal deficit. that is the amount which is just short, which you do good by borrowing. Now, why do you borrow? Any borrowing must be designed to be utilized for those areas of investment which will give you return, so that you are able to repay. That is the basic principle of fiscal borrowing, Therefore, in order to invest in capital expenditure, to create those assets which are capable of creating that kind of return over the years that you are able to repay. That is why when you borrow, you need to spend that borrowing for creating such infrastructure, such public assets which are capable of creating that enabling environment for you to be able to get fund which will accrue to the state exchequer, which you will do good for the repayment, both principal and interest. You understand? So that is how it is. Now, therefore, you have a borrowing from the open market. You have both negotiated from the financial institutions and also borrowing through, from this is regulated by RBI. So you have the bonds and other things. So there are a number of instruments for borrowing. But as I'm saying, do not actually club all together with the loan which is referred to as soft loan provided by Government of India. You have the figures. What is out of the total borrowing for that particular fiscal year? What is the actual amount which is the borrowing coming from Government of India? It is 1,000 plus. But the actual borrowing is more than that. So now what I'm trying to say is that, now you go to that another figure. Here you will see that out of the total borrowings of that particular year, only 44% has been spent, for capital expenditure. Only 44%. That means the rest 56% has gone somewhere. Where has it gone? Where has that 56% of the total borrowing gone? Now you will see it in the report. The balance of the borrowing in the public debt was utilized to repay the principal and part of the interest on public debt of previous years. So you borrow and borrow, then you will shrink the space of the fund available for actual capital expenditure. And you will again enlarge the requirement to do good in respect of your repayment of the principal and also the interest of the burden of the borrowings. So this is the reflection of the state fiscal health. You are borrowing, that means whatever you are borrowing, as I have said, now if your EMI required to be paid is 75,000, you are earning 50,000, you are borrowing to ensure that you are not declared by the bank as a defaulter. But you are borrowing, you are further borrowing, you are further borrowing to service the repayment of both principal and interest. That is where the concern lies. That is where the government is lying to the people, that you are borrowing to pay the principal and interest, and you are increasing your borrowing, and you will further increase your borrowing to repay the principal and repayment. I condemn this attitude. This is going to lead the state to a disastrous future, as has been honestly and truly reflected by the red flag given by the CAG. It's a red flag. There are many other things which I will not talk today. There are many other glaring irregularities which could not have happened unless there has been a complete patronage by the leadership in respect of misuse of fund by certain departments. That we will discuss some other time. You just maintain that fiscal deficit we did not allow to cross 3. Yeah, that is one part. And you looked at the debt GSDP ratio. Though the target is 28, I think I have not indicated what was the actual figure. The figure shoot up to 43%. The debt GSDP ratio reflected in the CAG report is 43, not 28. The target is 28. But has there been any sincere and honest attempt to maintain that target? No. And have they taken into cognizance where they have probably failed They have not, because they are in denial mode. So denial mode means they already knew what was there. They don't want to take course correction. Meaning they do not have the intention to protect the interests of the people, interests of the state. Therefore, our concern is what type of burden you want to leave behind for the state, for the people, for the children, for the generation next. How are you going to service their repayment of the huge burden of repayment of both principal and interest because of their unlimited borrowing? No, because they have already themselves scripted the modus operandi. That's what I have said. I have given you an example which is reflected by the target set by themselves. When you are setting the target for fiscal deficit which is beyond 4, then your target set for debt GSDP ratio has to commensurate, and because there is a synergy between the two. You cannot have these figures in isolation. When you work out the total fiscal deficit, you also will automatically have its bearing on the debt GSDP ratio, because your borrowing will change the figure in respect of the debt and GSDP ratio. So you are setting only 28, 28, 28 as target, but your fiscal deficit is like this. How can you have the same debt GSDP ratio? That's why I'm saying that means they tried to camouflage it, but they didn't know how to do it.
So where does a layman go?
Now, that's why I will subscribe the idea of not allowing them to engage on jargon. They talk about sinking fund, this and that, and the repayment about the soft loan pertaining to the government grants and loans.
EAP.
Now, how do you manage to get a huge approval of various schemes where you have the support coming from World Bank, support coming from Asian Development Bank, support coming from JICA? How do you get? It is because of the fiscal health. It is because of the fiscal health that we maintain during our time. When you, as a banker, whom will I lend? I will lend to the borrower whom I trust.
Who can repay?
Who can repay? And whose, the whole financial transaction records of the past data is reflective of that capability. That's why you will have the states which will qualify and which will supersede other states while they take cognizance of various proposals. And that is how we got so much of schemes approved to be funded under Asian Development Bank, by the World Bank, by the different financial institutions. It is because of that we are strong in our financial fundamentals in respect to our fiscal health. Now, you continue these. After 5 years, you go back to World Bank, you will be red flagged. I have given you an example so that everybody will understand. I have given you an example by giving the figure. Total borrowing, out of the total borrowing for that particular fiscal year, out of that total borrowing, only 44% were used for capital expenditure. That means 56% is, out of the total borrowing, 56% was utilized to service the repayment of the principal and interest payment of the borrowing, earlier borrowing. So you will go on increasing this repayment by borrowing. That means to repay the principal amount and interest you are borrowing already. So where do you, how do you reconcile with the situation? If you want to get out of the debt trap, you will borrow more. So you will lead the state to a deeper and deeper debt trap. You will not be able to come out of the pit. Now, they may say that it is an instrument for every government to fund their developmental initiatives. Yes, that's what I'm saying. But look at how much of percentage of the total borrowing was spent for the capital expenditure. Only 44%. 56% has gone for repaying their loan. And it will go on increasing.
Which years are particularly that 44% is?
I'm talking about that CAG report which was tabled in the recent. That means it is specific to 22-23. Now you will go again to 21-22. 21-22, you look at our overall growth in 2021 was less. Why? 1921 less. Because of the COVID pandemic. Now, since you have suddenly had a very low growth because of the pandemic, then as you recover, it looks high. But you are not calculating from the preceding years which were prior to the pandemic. You are calculating from the pandemic. Therefore, the figure looks very high. But in reality, you all know. Only the wearer of the shoes knows where the shoe pinches. So the public know, you know, I know. Now, another thing. This I want to add, though I am actually reluctant to add. I am reluctant to add because this particular, whatever we have today shared in my press briefing might get diluted. But please remember one thing. This is in spite of the fact that our share of tax revenue have gone up. Non-tax revenue have slumped, but tax revenue have gone up. Now tell me how the tax revenue have gone up. Every item that you buy, you pay GST. How do you pay GST? How is the GST calculated? In terms of percentage. So the more the price goes up, the more the tax the government gets. Huh? If you buy a flight ticket, instead of 10,000, if they are charging you 15,000, by 50% their GST increases automatically. Are you with me? Now similarly, you look at the inflation here. Every item, whether it is cement, whether it is steel, whether it is anything, how much GST they are collecting and realizing from the cement? Because it is in terms of percentage. 28%. So if the 100 rupee wala becomes 200, the 28% will become double in terms of the cumulative collection, though it is 28%, but because the price has gone up. Probing agency, I will be visiting and I'll be going and seeing. Because data are available in the website. Let us go and see on the ground. I'll be embarking upon this journey very soon. I will request all of you, whoever can, be part of the team. Let us go. Let people know. Let the truth comes up. So the truth prevails. Because I know, you know, people know that this government will always be on denial mode. They are saying that those data are available. Data are available, yes. Based on that data only people are telling, na, ki kya hua hai, what is there, what is not there, which is not commensurating to the data which are available in the website.
So, but the government is claiming that it got two bonuses. It got bonus because of good performance. Like we did good.
You have seen, you are witness to that very news which was carried by media when the Honorable Chief Minister has gone on behalf of the state and received that award. Huh? On JJM. Because of what? Because of the so-called datas. Because of the so-called smart paperworks. Brilliant paperworks. You see? Let us go to the site. Whether the paperworks, you want to implement paperworks or you want to really serve the people?
Well, Doctor, one